Welcome everybody to our May 30th meeting. We are recording this, and Scott will be able to get this out to our members throughout the state. So the first thing I want to say, thanks for the help, Jennifer and Scott and a number of people I want to thank to help us win the chapter award for development. Chapter and share. So that's actually the award. You see that?
Yep. Cool.
Yep, it's nice. Presented to AUVSI, Empire State Chapter, in recognition of appreciation of your dedication, service, and upholding AUVSI's vision and values. So that special guest, yes, we're going to have a special guest speak to us very shortly, Ryan Latourette, and Scott will be introducing him in a moment.
All right, Ryan, I'm going to either flatter or embarrass you with your bio here. First of all, let me make sure I get your name right. It's Ryan Latourette. Am I pronouncing
Latourette?
Latourette?
Yes, Latourette.
Cool. Yeah, so Ryan Latourette has been flying multi-rotor aircraft, otherwise known as drones, since 2013. He's a techie at heart, enjoying more than 27 years in the IT industry. Ryan saw UAVs as the next great technology of the information age. In the last few years, he's managed to fit in over 3,500 hours of flight time and capture stunning aerial photos and videos of iconic structures and landscapes across the nation and internationally. Finding his passion for technology, photography, and law, Ryan has been an advocate for drones and expanding their uses while driving for public acceptance and incorporation of the technology in a multitude of industries. As a founding member of the Michigan Coalition of Drone Operators, he's successfully tested state preemption drone law and established statewide precedent. He's also been successful in removing and preventing local drone regulations in at least a dozen states. He's currently the Director of Regulatory Affairs for the Great Lakes Drone Company and is an IT manager with the state of Michigan. And Ryan lives in Grand Ledge, Michigan with his wife, 2 daughters, and more than a dozen drones. All right, so Ryan, the floor is yours. Tell us all about what you're doing.
All right. Well, thank you so much. It's Scott Schaffman, right? I was going to say, I know Scott. So it's like, oh, okay. No, that's not Scott. Hey, let me start with a funny story. One, when I was first starting into drones, I looked around and our family was selling a family farm. And I thought, it'd be nice to get an aerial shot of the farm before it sold. And there was no such thing as drones, or at least at that point there wasn't, that I knew of. And so I called around to helicopter companies, Cessna companies that would take a shot. And everybody said, yeah, 1,500, 2,500, et cetera. And I thought, I'm never going to get the shot. And then suddenly I see on the internet, hey, there's this thing called a drone. It doesn't have a camera on it, but you can hang one on it. And it was the Phantom version 1, first introduced. And I looked at it and thought, $500? I've got a GoPro. I'll hang one on there. I'll go ahead. I'll get that shot. I'll turn around and sell the drone. And hey, maybe I lose $50 out of the deal, but I get the shot that I want. Well, as it turned out, I never did get that shot, and I never did sell the drone. So it was a love at first sight that, hey, wow, this is something else, and I can see where this is going. And I focus on that in that my love is IT. I grew up with IT all around me, and enjoyed photography and enjoy law. So I put all 3 together. And right now I do advocacy for drones. So I am the Director of Regulatory Affairs for the Great Lakes Drone Company. Their primary business is to do drone light shows. So the same shows that you would see at a Super Bowl or Olympics, that's what we do. And probably the big one that we just got through was Louisville, Thunder over Louisville, with a 200 drone light show there. Our typical shows are anywhere between 25 and 400 drones in the sky at any time. But a real big key to that is understanding what's legal and what's not. And that's where I've come in. So when I really got started with drones, I was flying them all the time. All right. If you did not if you couldn't find me at work, I was out flying a drone. It was just that much of love for the systems. And as I was doing that, there were local communities that were saying, hey, wait a minute, we need to do something about this. Maybe we don't trust these things. Let's go ahead and start regulating them. And the first place to do that was a little town that was just about 15 miles away, called DeWitt, Michigan. And they wanted to put forward this drone regulation to say that you couldn't fly within their jurisdiction, the complete ban. And upset with that, I grabbed a few people who were also interested in drones. We came from around the state, and we got together and spoke to that council prior to them reading in their first resolution. The council bought into what we were saying, and they started to change that resolution to allow drones in certain instances. When we got into the full meeting, the AMA, with the what is it, Academy of Model Aircraft, came in and they said, oh no, we're actually in favor of you banning drones here, as long as you give us a carve out that we can have them at our own particular airport to be built later on. We don't know if we'll do it, but at least give us a carve out. And so that legislation, that ordinance went in place, and we were very upset with that. Fast forward, we had opportunity that had come into place. DJI was looking to lobby and put forward a bill with the state of Michigan, and the legislature passed the Public Act of 436 of Public Act 436 of 2016 that disallowed any political subdivision, local government, from either creating or enforcing drone ordinances. Bingo. We went to the legislature, went to the state house, went to the senators, said, you must pass this bill. This is so important. It is going to allow for you to lock down all these local governments who are trying to stand up ordinances in violation of what the FAA really wants. The FAA does not want a patchwork quilt of the regulation, noting that if you have such in place, that it would actually be a disaster, a real danger to the national airspace, rather than causing safety in the national airspace. So the legislature took that up, they passed the bill, and now we've gone through and started to pick off all those little ordinances across the state. In order to do so, we had to do some really clever thinking about which locations really were adamant that they had to have a rule or legislation preventing drones, prohibiting drones. And we looked at how they were prohibiting it. If it was, well, you need a permit, that's not so bad, versus you just can't fly here at all. We found the ones that were most egregious, so that our people, our flyers, would be most upset about those particular rules. In particular, we had Genesee County. Genesee County demanded that you would not be able to fly anywhere within their park system. And they literally were chasing people out of the park. The night before that I was supposed to go out there and fly, I got a call, and it was Jason Harrison. He says to me, I heard you're looking to come down and fly in a park and try to get a ticket. And I said, yes, absolutely, I am. And I said, unfortunately, I'm not going to be able to be there tomorrow. He said, well, I am. I'll do it. Okay, do that. Let me know how it goes. He calls me the next day. He says, Ryan, you wouldn't believe it. I was in handcuffs. I was detained. They took my stuff. They took my drone. They took my GoPro. They took my cell phone. They took my Apple Watch. They threw me in the back of the police car, and they were considering me for arrest. And I was floored. We were expecting a ticket. We wanted a ticket so that we could go fight it. And instead, now we had a real big fight. It turned out and credit to Jason, he found an attorney in Dean Greenblatt, fantastic attorney, who also is part of an aviation. He has his is licensed to fly manned aircraft, and he has his own aircraft as well. He took up the case, got it dismissed from court, and then we sat down with him and said, how do we go about this? What's the best, most efficient way to take on local governments and test the state preemption law? Our choice was to go ahead and do an injunction against the county. So we chased the county with that to try to say, we would enjoin you from enforcing your ordinance. We got before the court. It was a full day of testimony. We actually had to come back to court a second time to end that testimony. And then on Thanksgiving morning, the night before Thanksgiving, we got a one-day injunction that would disallow them from enforcing their actions on a particular park for just Thanksgiving, which is called Moundsgiving for this 4x4 park. We went there. We were flying there. I made certain to fly right next to the ranger station so that I would be engaged. And sure enough, it did happen. They said, you can't fly here. And I said, well, I can today. He says, why is that? I said, well, I have a court order. Can you show me the paperwork? Sure, here it is. Took a look. He said, I don't know why the judge would do that. He knows we don't allow drones here. And we kind of snickered and went about our business. It took another month or so. Actually, it was 3 months before we finally got the final decision that enjoined the county entirely. And from that point, we've not had trouble with Genesee County. Instead, we were able to shop that around to other counties and say, you have a drone ordinance. Do you want to get rid of it? Otherwise, we're probably going to end up suing you. And almost every county dropped their ordinance with the exception of one, and that was Ottawa County. We did take Ottawa County to court. We won in district court, and we were waiting for them to appeal. We knew that they would because that was another one that was so egregious. And they did. And we went to the Court of Appeals. The importance there is that while we could have done district court after district court, it would only apply to the specific county that we were in. By having Ottawa County appeal the decision, we are now at the state level. So when we won at the Court of Appeals, and we did this past year in February it was, that set a statewide precedent where instead of having to play whack-a-mole with every particular county, we now have the true exemption or preemption from the state of Michigan, which indeed says a local government cannot create or enforce a drone ordinance. So that's a little bit of how Michigan came about. I'll turn this quickly to say New York is in the same position right now. So we were able to talk to state legislatures in New York, House, I should say your assemblyman, and then state senators to try to see if we could get legislation there going. A number of drone operators throughout New York, especially in New York City, are upset enough that they want to see preemption go through at the state level. So House Bill 194 was written up, and a subsequent Senate bill with the same language was also presented, and that is going through session right now. Unfortunately, it's in committee, and we know that bills can die in committee. So, excuse me. So we have a need to go through and support that legislation, get everybody that we can to knock on assemblymen's doors, knock on senators' doors, call them, make assurances that this is the right thing to do, and that it's important for it to be done. That can be from drone operators. It can be from the customers of drone operators, whether that's realtors who understand that aerial pictures increase the sales of their property. It's at a rate of 36% is what I was last told. The houses with aerial pictures sell 36% faster than those that do not. You could have construction companies who rely on drones to map their locations to check out the volume of materials that they're going to be using. Anything that you can think of, all those customers can emphasize the importance of that legislation as well. And I think the real key for this particularly comes from a long time ago when cars were first introduced. So back in the 1800s, when cars started to come available in Europe, in England of all places, the English decided, hey, we need to legislate this stuff. We aren't really comfortable with the automobile at this time. It scares our horses. It's a danger to farmers. And so they created what are called red flag laws. The red flag required that automobile owners have a person stand out in front of their car waving a red flag to alert farmers, right? And they could only go, I want to say it was 5 miles an hour. Can you imagine if those laws stuck? Well, they did in a way. What they did is they stuck with England, where car companies said, there's no business here. We got to move. Michigan was one of those governments that said, hey, come on, we're going to help you out. And of course, we know Michigan has the big three. Every major auto manufacturer located themselves here. The first highway in the United States was located in downtown Detroit. And that's because of regulatory process. So I look at this and say, that's where our advocacy has to be for drones, where we have to open things up rather than lock things down where the industry doesn't get going. Gosh, I've been talking a while. Scott,
I'm personally sitting here just like taking it all in, Ryan. This is fantastic. I think everyone here is, this is gold for our members here. I just want to add one more thing. I actually just linked everybody the link to the bill. Or sorry, the bill that's in committee in the Senate right now. I think that's S4650. And to New York State's credit, right? Like pretty easy website. So I encourage you to go on there, take a look. It shows you how to contact your senator. It shows the senator that's sponsoring the bill. I encourage everyone to contact that senator. It's Senator Timothy Kennedy, and I would contact him, contact your local senator.
Yeah, I wouldn't contact Timothy. Timothy's on our side.
Okay.
One, I can tell you that Scott Schaufman actually worked with Timothy to get the bill written.
Even better.
So yeah, so Timothy is one of our players here. That what he needs is support from the other committee members, and just sharing with them to get it to go through. Probably let me also kind of shift gears and tell you that I go to a lot of live stream events, and I'm a guest speaker. I think in the past week I've been on like 5 different shows. One of the things that I've always said about New York is that the way to New York is through New Jersey and the Eastern Coast states. One of the big victories we just had was in New Jersey, in Franklin Lakes, New Jersey. Franklin Lakes had an ordinance on the books that said you could not fly on their beaches, could not fly over their municipal properties. And we looked at that legislation in relation to the state law. New Jersey, like Michigan, has a state law that preempts local governments from creating or enforcing laws. And so we went to Franklin Lakes and showed them that state law, showed them how very much the FAA already has a comprehensive set of regulations for UAS, and that their law was moot. Their attorney had several emails going back and forth with me, but in the end, he said, "You're right, that you are absolutely correct. This is preempted. We need to get it off the books." And we got a unanimous vote on that for the first reading in April, and then unanimous reading just week and a half ago. So it was really exciting to see New Jersey is moving that direction and getting rid of onerous local regulations. So I'm confident that we can do the same in New York. We just have to work towards first that preemption process, and then educating local governments and officials to say there's really no concerns that you need to legislate at a local level. Everything can be done at the state level.
That's very interesting, Ryan, and excellent presentation. Scott, I met Scott back in 2016 or 18 or so. He might have shared this with you. Under the exact same circumstances with Oyster Bay and then Huntington, which you're probably familiar with if you're familiar with
Yep.
Long Island, right? So I'll never forget this as long as I live. A very close friend of mine from the AMA and and I almost said it, and Scott Harrigan, and Scott Harrigan actually went to Oyster Bay and educated them.
Yeah.
They absolutely educated them. And that is the key here, education. Through that, I met Scott. Of course, through our other friend who was handling the AMA side of this. And what I ended up doing, since I lived in Huntington, right, in Huntington Township, there was a no drone law, zero drone law, nothing. And then I basically brought what was drawn up in Oyster Bay over to the town attorney's office in Huntington. And then Scott will remember when we sat in front of Lupinacci and the rest of them, the whole gang, and there was a packed house when we came up, and I was representing the local drone personnel in our area. And I'll never forget this as long as I live. We got everything we wanted except one thing. Remember, Scott, that one thing we didn't get that Cutherson had to say? Cutherson was one of the board members at the time, and he was the one who put in no drones, right? So we're going, everybody else on the team seemed, well, drones are okay. We understand it now. But Cutherson just still had it in him, no drones. And what was very interesting, we could not fly around the borders or lift off. If Scott, correct me if I'm wrong, because I'm going down memory lane now. We certainly couldn't lift off their parklets or their parks. We absolutely no way we're going to be able to do that. Nor could we fly near them. Like if there was an adjacent private property, they didn't even want that.
Yeah.
And it was really all about fear and privacy laws, which people got into him and said, this can't happen, right? And basically, I remember when he said, you can't be around our parks. And I turned to Scott and the rest of the gang, and I said, should I continue this? And all of them simultaneously said, no, we're okay. And we really got everything done. And what Huntington produced was 2 permits, one for recreation, no charge, right? Just let them know when you're going to do it. And, and the courtesy was called public safety. That was the courtesy. All right. The second one was they would charge you either $50 a session or $500 a year to do it commercially. That's what they came up with. So what that did, that opened up dialogue with the town attorney, and even the new town attorneys in Huntington are still in charge of this. They will not give it to public safety. They have to deal with it. And that's okay with me, because all I did was meet the new regime and just say, this is what we did. This was the history, mention Scott Harrigan and all this and how we got there. And then all they want to really be, Ryan, is educated. When they're working from fear, that's when everybody gets in their ear and, oh my God, we have to do something about it. But when you sit down and take the time and actually educate these people who make decisions, things start loosening up pretty quickly and they start understanding. And and that is the key, is education. And I love what you're doing. And things are happening in New York very, very quickly through the NYPD. And, something, that the NYPD is looking at very closely, and the beauty, and this is New York City now. And our Mayor Adams, is a technological advocate. And he wants to see the move made on drones commercially and through the police department, and be totally transparent. And so that all kind of came together, believe it or not, when I got a phone call from the leader of the TARU unit to tell me that this was now going to be set in place. And they're going to start putting the word out that the New York City Police Department is going to start, saying, yes, this can happen. This is going to, and then guide the way. And I was very happy with that, because they know they have to be transparent. That's number one. And number two, they know that commercial aviators want to work, and they want to see that happen. So there's a big change that's happening in the mindset of New York City as we speak. And that's because of the mayor. So,
That includes,
so it's a
that
very
also-
interesting thing that's going on.
that also includes the fire department too. They're very heavy into UAVs at this moment.
Yeah.
Yeah, that
And
I can tell you that that really started back in 2018. I think it was 2018. There was the first NYCU conference. Mickey put it on, and well, I'm trying to think who else was there. They flew me into New York City, and we had a conference. All of the police, the fire department leaders were there. Media was there, and we talked. It was a drone leadership conference to talk about, in particular, the aviation ordinance that New York City has. And we were trying to look at how many operators were arrested or ticketed from that aviation ordinance, and whether that aviation ordinance actually applied to UAS. We made the determination that it really does not. And yet the city, many of the borough representatives still held true that no, this was in place. It was preventing launching and landing of any aircraft unspecified. And here they're holding this from what, the 1930s. So yeah. It's a really old ordinance. It needs to be rewritten.
you know
but
the
at
history
the time,
on that, Ryan? Ryan, you know the history, why they did that? It's
Yeah,
a
they did.
fascinating story. Go right ahead. Take it away.
Well, they really didn't want helicopters on every single high rise, is what it amounted to. Because they were getting so much in the airspace already that they knew they had to prevent it. But there's probably another story along those lines too, if you want
Well,
to share.
there was somebody wanted to see if, and I don't remember if it was Fifth Avenue or Broadway. He landed his single engine plane in New York City, and that freaked everyone out. And there's history to this. You could actually look this up, and they said, we need to do something about that. And that was a single engine plane that landed in New York City because the guy can do it, and he did it. And that freaked everybody out. And then the aviation law soon followed. So
The other history to that too was that there was a helicopter that fell off one of the skyscrapers, and that was the push. And then, when there's ever something of catastrophic like that, they immediately go to restrict everyone from doing anything.
Yep, FAA regulations had always been termed, written in blood, because they were always retroactive to some type of event.
Right.
UAS was the first time in history that the FAA had actually been proactive in creating regulations for an aircraft. And now they're trying to ease them because they went too far.
Yeah. We still have the land rights to deal with, because if we have to take off, one of the things we have to do as pilots is get permission from the landowner. And it is suggested that we get written permission. And what ends up happening when you start explaining all this to the owner, it's hard, because all of a sudden they go, what am I getting into? And then you almost spook them away from the job. I'm not signing that. What is this? But if you really educate the client, right? If if they're half-hearted, they'll run away. Yeah, and they will run. I'm not, they don't have no clue. The public has no clue, and many governments locally have no clue. And that is a recipe for disaster for anybody getting into this game or in the game. And,
that's exactly some of the things that we're looking at when we go to local councils now, right? And I'm dealing with councils now that are in other states that are talking about putting in legislation. And the statement back to them is, you are going to regulate that they can't launch in your park. Well, you don't have any jurisdiction over airspace. So now they're going to step right outside that park and still launch and fly over it. Is that okay with you? Well, then we'll just lock down the city. Well, guess what, folks? Beyond line of sight is coming. It's really coming. The FAA has already said it's coming. Congress has mandated the FAA to start those rules. So I tell them, you can lock down that entire city. That's fine. But what's going to happen is somebody's going to step outside and they're going to be a mile away from your city and flying over it. How are you going to police that? Would you rather have them standing inside of your jurisdiction where you can keep an eye on things, you can monitor things, what they're doing, where they're flying, or do you want them far away where you have no jurisdiction whatsoever? You're going to have to call the county sheriff, or maybe it's even across state lines. You're going to have to, organize with another state police department to really figure out what's going on. And do you even know? And so that's where we've really focused to say, if you're looking at using your land power to prevent drones, think again, because it's not going to apply the moment they're outside your jurisdiction.
So right now I have a similar problem, but within the jurisdiction. We have a place north of us called Lloyd Harbor. This is where very wealthy people live. And there was a potential client that I had, that all he wanted to do was take an aerial shot from the air of his mother's house and give it to her. Simple as that. So I said, and I took the Scott Harrigan approach, and I said, okay, that's fine. Please speak to Lloyd Harbor Police Department, because it seems that the Lloyd Harbor committee who deals with all that lets the police department deal with all these local issues. And he came back and said, look, this was the client. The police said to us, look, you can fly or you don't fly. That's up to you. If there's a complaint, we're going to have to respond. So there was nothing in the Lloyd Harbor charter that allowed us to do this. So unlike Huntington, and Lloyd Harbor is actually part of Huntington, if you really look at it, but they're their own subdivision, okay? So they make their own laws.
Talking about a village within a
They're an
greater
incorporated village, and basically what they say is that the police will not get behind this. They will not. And they will shut us down if there is a complaint, even if we go and, even if the client goes and speak to them. So Scott, what I'm going to do this next couple of weeks, I'm going to go up there myself and speak with them again and see where they stand directly. Now, the last time I did this, the police department, this was back in 2018, said they wanted nothing to do with it. And if we get a complaint, we're going to shut you down. And not too much has changed since then, since this last client. Not too much has changed. So I'm going to test the waters up there again because it affected my client, and I'm going to see what happens. And I'm going to go up there with all my credentials, all my insurances, everything that I can say, yes, I'm legit, even in Huntington. And this is what we do in Huntington. How can we make this happen with your police force? And get the backup when they get a call and said, oh, we do know John Cohan. He's legitimate. He's got a license. He's got insurance. He's allowed to be there by the owner of the property. That's all we need them to say. And then they can hang up the phone. They don't need to go and follow up and send a guy there. They just got to be able to say, hey, we know this guy. He's legit. He called it in. We know he's flying. Don't worry, ma'am. We got it under control. That's all they got to say.
Yeah,
They
but
don't
the
have-
laws, the way UAVs were looked at in 2018 and 16, and when you were still doing the exception 333 before the 107, there were a lot of restrictions on the drones because there was no knowledge, as you were saying, that you brought out in regards to education. But in 2018 to 2022, 23, people look at things a little bit more differently now in regards to. So you may not have that much that type of restriction or that type of response that if we'll let you go unless someone complains, and if they complain, then we have to respond, which is what they have to do as police officers, as law enforcement. But I don't think you're going to get many people complaining because it's getting to be such a normal thing now in regards to how many UAVs are in the air, believe it or not. As long as they're not doing anything criminally wise. But you also have a lot of organizations are now doing counter drone stuff, where a drone goes up in the air and now they shoot it down, because it's on their property too. That's another issue in itself too.
Let me address that one, right? So counter UAS. Understand that counter UAS are completely illegal in the United States, completely. So 18 USC 32 disallows you to shoot down an aircraft, whether it's with a bullet, whether it's, throwing a football at it, or even just using an EMP cannon, right, and bringing it down. It's completely illegal. The only time that CUAS is legal is specific instances with the Department of Defense that have been clarified between the Department of Defense and the FAA. We actually have a case right now in New York where an individual was flying and getting pictures of a bridge. They were flying recreationally over at Fort Hamilton. If you're to look up the airspace there, it is Class G airspace. No authorization is required. They were flying a drone that had already been registered with the FAA, so they were completely compliant. They followed all 44809 rules for recreational flight. And when they crossed over the base used CAS to bring down that drone. It ended up crashing on the ground. The individual went chasing after it. They drove over there, went up to the gate. Hey, my drone crashed on your property. Can I go get it? And they said, no, but you're being detained. They took her to a room. They interrogated her for several hours, not a short time at all. And they wanted her to sign a confession that said that she was operating illegally. She refused. She instead wrote down exact details of what she was doing at the time to show that she was truly in legal compliance with the FAA regulations. And yet they still wrote a ticket for her. That ticket was addressed, I want to say it was 2 years ago next month. And its statute of limitations comes due at that time. The statute of limitations for that ticket is 2 years. What the Fort Hamilton didn't want to do was acknowledge anything about that incident. We did a series of FOIA requests to try to get records from them. We made it clear that, and I was the one who wrote the FOIA request. We made it clear to them that I knew all the details of this thing, that I actually had the ticket, that I knew that person's social security number, driver's license number, every particular potential information that would disqualify me from getting those records. We made clear that they knew, I knew that already. What they still chose to do, and it took months, it literally took almost a year's time before finally a government ombuds agency came in and said, you must fulfill this FOIA request and do so efficiently. Then they came back and said, we cannot provide you the records because you are not her attorney or immediate family member. So we're sitting on that. We know that it expires in 2 years. And when it does, we are going to charge them with conversion, which is actual theft of the drone. And then they're going to have to, end up buying her a brand new drone because they have to replace it at the time that they converted it, which is exactly when they used their CUAS to bring it down.
You know, Fort Hamilton is considered the retirement home. I spent some time at Fort Hamilton, and that's the retirement home. But it's very protective. Yes, and
Yep.
and funny because it falls out of the city and state. It falls under the federal magistrates in regards to. So that's why they get to play around a little bit more than a city or state ordinance. I'm sorry to interrupt. I really am. I apologize for that.
No, you're exactly it. And I think that's where they're taking this idea from, is that they have their own set of rules. They can do what they want, and they're about to find out otherwise. I think they already know otherwise. They're just going to learn it in a much more painful fashion soon.
Yeah.
Good job, Ryan.
If I may, it's a couple of highlights that I struck me that I think are worth repeating. Couple of things that I found in my experience that line up with what you said. The first one is, we talked about Oyster Bay, Long Island here, and that's the whack-a-mole, right? That's the having to go to every one of these ones and re-explain it. And, I'm proud of the work we've done on Long Island, but, it's just, we don't have enough hours in the day to go to every, every single county, every village, everyone here. And that's, in case people are curious of why we're pushing for state preemption, that's it. So that, you don't have to go to your local town and say, and re-explain everything that John explained in Nassau County all over again, right? Like you said, I really have to give you credit, Ryan, for having the strategy and knowing where to go and where to focus your attention on, so that you're not just, turning the wheel over and over with every county in Michigan, right? So I think that's probably one of the biggest reasons you've been successful. The other big takeaway I had that I think I've seen this time and time again is an attorney with aviation experience seems to be gold. I just want to add too that when in Oyster Bay had a really bad law, a really, really terribly written one, which they, like you said, laws tend to migrate, right? So it came from the town of Hempstead, who I don't know where they got it, but they wrote a terrible one. Oyster Bay photocopied it, right? The deputy attorney in Oyster Bay just happened to be going for his pilot's license at the time, and he was fantastic. Like, he was the enlightened person in the group that actually really, really rewrote that. And the biggest thing he did is basically spell out black and white, but yeah, like, all we can do is regulate whether or not you can start a drone on the property. At the moment, all they could do is whether or not you land or take off on their property, and that, basically wrote an acknowledgement that, like, look, you can be 5 feet away, it's not on, around, or above. All that language is completely, useless. It's just a land use thing, and you can't control the airspace. So that was a big one. And the very last thing that you mentioned that I want to highlight too, and I found this to be very powerful, you had mentioned to not only write into your assembly person, but have your client. And I actually think that is a great idea, because especially here in New York, I know quite a few of us drone pilots have had pretty good architecture, engineering, construction firms that are like big names as our clients. And I actually think encouraging them to write in is just as powerful, if not more powerful, than having drone pilots write in, because I really think, if you have XYZ engineering company that has a contract with the state and writes something into the matter of, hey, we're using a drone on your state contract, and, you're making it hard for us to fulfill your contract, that kind of thing. I think that's another angle here that is very powerful. And that worked well with us, in getting Long Island working. It wasn't just about convincing the town, it was showing the town and the organization how many private companies that pay taxes there use drones, in a positive manner. And so it's kind of like, don't take our word for it, listen to our clients, right? So I think that's great advice.
Yeah, the one piece that I hadn't shared, right, is, and this is something to think about as well, the thing that you are going to have to combat isn't going to be the state senator or the assemblyman itself. It's going to be the Karen that hasn't yet shown up. So you better have in your talking points all the details that dispel anything that Karen is going to suggest, that they're a safety concern. Point to the UAS, point to the Assure reports that the FAA had commissioned, that they're a privacy concern. As you're training folks, or as you show that, right, take that drone up for a assemblyman and say, all right, I'm at 50 feet. We're going to turn around and I'm going to show you these people on the ground. Pick out which one are women. Pick out which one are men. Can you tell me? What is their expression on their face? Right. So take those concerns that you know are coming, right? Everybody has the privacy concern, everybody has the safety concern, and dispel each and every one of them with a talking point. Show rather than allow that to, seep into their conscience later on when a Karen does show up.
That's fantastic advice. Can I ask
Ryan, can you put your contact information in the chat, please?
Yeah, I'm on an iPad, so I won't be able to, but it is my last name.
Scott, could you do that?
Yeah, I can.
Yeah, it's just my last name at Comcast.net. So Latourette at Comcast.net.
Put that in right now.
Thank you.
And I should say I am on Facebook constantly, so hit me up with Messenger. I'm on LinkedIn. I'm not as often as I should be, but I'm there. Hit me up. Yeah, I'm happy to take questions. I'm happy to help in any way I possibly can.
I'll be in contact with you, Ryan, since the trajectory here is AAM. That's a big bear. So,
right.
Yep. So that's the next thing on the agenda, as you know, ushering in air mobility. So I'm sure you got a lot to say about that too.
Yeah, let me share too that I am not a person who shies away from confrontation. In fact, I challenge people. Hey, come at me, come confront me with something, because I look at it as an educational opportunity. So, for instance, when our Capitol, downtown Lansing has the Capitol building, the Capitol Commission actually put an unenforceable ordinance around it that said you cannot fly over the state capitol. I had been training the Michigan State Police, who are the guardians of the Capitol, how to fly drones. I would go there in the afternoons or evenings, be flying. They'd come out. I'd say, hey, we're going to teach you drones. Get your hands on the controller. They would get a chance to fly, and I'd be walking them through what does it mean to fly a drone? What's legal? What's not? And it came down to one point. I was flying there, and in the evening, I had specifically gone on the same location next to the Lansing City Police. So I was right on their block, which is directly across the street from the Capitol building. Sure enough, out comes an officer. I think he was a rookie officer. He sees the drone in the sky, sees me operating. He says, "Get that thing down now." Bingo, I've got an opportunity, right? I don't necessarily see it as a confrontation. I know I'm going to win, so it's an opportunity, right? So I said, under whose authority? Oh, that ticked him off. Well, okay, now we got a really fun opportunity. So as he's flying over, I said, you don't have any jurisdiction over flight. And by the way, I can fly here. I've got all the proper credentials. He said, we'll see about that. And you're in trouble now. So he gets on his radio and he calls up the state police. Sure enough, as he's calling them, I said, I'm going to bring it down for you so we can talk. So I'm bringing down the drone, and it's an Inspire. So we're talking a good sized drone, and fairly concerning when you're getting around people. He's coming up close to me, and I said, you got to get the hell back. Well, that ticked him off even more. Landed the drone, and just as I'm doing so, the Michigan State Police car comes rolling down the wrong way on the one-way street that's in front of the Capitol, comes screeching to a halt. This rookie officer just has this grin on his face, and he says, you're in trouble now. Sure enough, door opens on the state police car. Hey, Ryan, I didn't know you were going to be here tonight. Do I get to fly? Bingo. And what ended up happening is here, the person I had taught how to fly drones, what they needed to know about drones, how to regulate drones, now had a chance to preach that to a new student. And here I am, the professor, just sitting back watching. It was enjoyable.
That's enjoyable.
Awesome.
All right, we got about 15 minutes left here. I'm going to open it up to the floor again. If there's any last questions, comments, just chime right in. And then, but before I do that, I see Scott Jessmore, and he's been on. Scott, can you introduce yourself for a moment before we move on? Are you still there?
Yeah, I'm here.
How did you?
Yeah, I'm out in Syracuse, New York. I work for SUNY Upstate with the Air Upstate program, where we are using Flytrex drones through Causey Aviation Unmanned to deliver pharmaceuticals from our outpatient pharmacy to our hospital. And we've got a short little flight we're doing right now, and we're working on expanding to between our two hospitals across the city, which, if you know much about Syracuse, currently we're looking to replace our highway that runs through our city. It's going to be a huge mess. So being able to fly pharmaceuticals around the city instead of going through the huge construction that's upcoming is going to be a lifesaver for us.
Have you worked with New Air at all?
Oh, absolutely. All the time.
Very good.
Yeah.
What's your, just quickly, what's your spin on New Air up there, and how is that benefiting companies like your own?
Oh, they are a huge benefit to us for knowledge, for a source of ideas and what we can do. We work a ton with Tony up there. He's
Tony
been a
Basil?
huge- oh yeah,
Yep.
Tony Basil. He's been a huge help, and the people on his staff too, Eric Haynes and a whole bunch of people, John Gustafson,
Mhm.
helping us out with all of our different projects. And obviously their corridor is helpful to us as well. One place we want to go is Verona, which is on the east side of Lake Oneida Lake. And that's kind of a few miles outside of their corridor. So it's going to help us get some BV loss flights for us as well.
Great. Excellent. Jen, was there something that you wanted to add?
Oh, I think two things are on my mind. One is that it's great to see people that I mean, I've only been with this particular team for 3 months, but it's great to see people that I haven't met before here. And I just want to ask everyone, you know, hopefully the next time that things come around, if you can maybe nudge to a couple of people. I would love to have Ryan's expertise is amazing, and everyone here were the right people to be here. But, you know, my vision would be that there would be 15 people to hear that level of expertise, which is great. And of course, I'm always interested in how can we get more women involved in the conversation, both about governance as well as participation. I just feel like there's this huge gap, and I want to do all that I can with you to make sure we bring everybody along. That's all.
Okay. Anybody else have any final questions or comments or what they're doing or anything at this point? The floor is open.
Yeah, so I wanted to say that it's very cool what you do. I was Googling up some terms like legislation and jurisdiction and what's a condonance. Yeah, but I think it's very cool when people get together to like fight for the same purpose, which is like to have drones approved in like certain counties you were talking about. So it's like a long way, and I think it's great that you have support from other people to do this. Yeah.
Wonderful.
And I'll just say, you know, it takes an army to chase this. So I'm not alone in what I'm doing. I just get to lead a group that's doing it. And I need more foot soldiers to do this across the nation in different states everywhere. One of the things that I think we'll share later on is we do have a free funder that's under my name. So if you look up free funder and my name, you'll find it's for the Michigan Coalition of Drone Operators. And we look at it as we need a legal defense fund. So it takes money, it takes talent, it takes people, and putting all those things together is very important to grow this industry.
Very good. Well, Ryan, you've been outstanding, very knowledgeable, and we appreciate what you had to offer. Scott, great job bringing Ryan aboard. We thank you. Ryan, thanks so much. I will be reaching out to you. We have a lot of things in common. There's no doubt about that. And like to explore that in the future.
Absolutely. And thank you for having me. I much appreciated. New York's on my mind. I lived there in Henrietta for a year, so I'm not unfamiliar with New York, but
Good.
I'm glad to be
Good.
back and helping out.